Take it there, who gon' take it there, who gon' take it there, who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air. It's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility.
So I want to highlight something that happened last week. Representative Zoe Zephyr, who is in the Montana Congress. She's a Democratic representative who is transgender, one of the only transgender representatives in the country. And she has been a pretty major figure for quite some time now. She, I believe, was controversial. I believe the same thing that the transgender member of the federal House, the federal Congress, experiencing basically censure and her very existence being politicized. I believe Zoe Zephyr experienced a lot of that same stuff. Her Republican colleagues in the Montana House, I believe it is, being incredibly hostile towards her. But she has held strong. She's still there. And she gave a speech on a bill that is being floated related to drag shows, and specifically being justified based on Drag Time Story Hour, which is for kids, where drag queens read stories to kids. This is something that right-wingers love to point at and say that this is evil, this is gross, this is fetishistic, grooming, whatever. And so Zoe Zephyr is speaking up in defense of drag and trans people and everybody that would be affected by this bill. And it seems that in doing so, she successfully converted enough of her Republican colleagues and convinced them, persuaded them to vote no. So we'll talk about that and how it's a hopeful sign, but also, unfortunately an isolated incident that I don't think we'll see too much of at the federal level. But listening to how Zoe Zephyr articulates herself here and appeals to the humanity of her colleagues is definitely inspiring.
Representative Zephyr. Thank you, Madam Chair. Here I am again to rise on another bill targeting the LGBTQ community. I first want to start off and say, at its very core, drag is art. Drag is a beautiful art. Drag has a deep history in this country, and it is a history that is important to my community. If you are a woman in this body wearing a suit today, you are challenging gender norms that existed long ago. And in some ways, drag does work to challenge those norms. There were 3 articles of clothing laws 50 years ago that said if you wore 3 articles of clothing that were indicative of the opposite gender, that the police could stop you and arrest you. It was those laws that led to the police raiding an LGBTQ bar in New York and led to the Stonewall riots, one of the most important civil rights moments in my community's history. I also want to reject the notion, however, that these are, as the sponsor says, events where explicit content is expected or where audience expect risque entertainment. Drag story hours I have been to here in Montana, they are like Disney princesses reading to people. We had people come in and talk about this. These are spaces where people come up and they sit down in libraries, and parents elect to bring their children and learn about books and the love of reading, and also, yes, be involved in part and to hear stories told from members of my community. That is important and that is beautiful, and I do not think that we should be standing up and saying that this art form, because it's somehow connected to my community, is not allowed. But there's something underpinning this that makes this even more insidious. And the sponsor called this a fix to last session's bill. It's important to note that last session's bill, when it was applied, the first application of this was not on a drag show. It was to prevent a trans woman from giving a history lesson in a library. That's where this came up. That's how this is going to be attempted to be applied as an attack against the trans community. And we have even more examples of that because, in committee, when the sponsor closed on this bill, he said, "This bill is needed," he said, and I quote his words, "because transgenderism is a fetish based on cross-dressing." Those were his words for why this bill's necessary. And I'm here to stand before the body and say that my life is not a fetish. My existence is not a fetish. I was proud less than a month ago to have my son up in the gallery here. Many of you on the other side met him. When I go to walk him to school, that is not a lascivious display. That is not a fetish. That is my family. This is what these bills are trying to come after. Not obscene shows somehow getting in front of children. We have the Miller test for that. We have laws for that. This is a way to target the trans community, and that is my opinion and in the speaker's own words. Please vote no.
Further discussion, Representative Essman.
Thank you, Madam.
So that was an excellent speech, a beautiful speech. Like I said, she's appealing to the humanity of these Republican colleagues of hers, which is a brave thing to do. I mean, that in itself is making yourself vulnerable enough that, you know, obviously in this case, the ideal scenario happened, which is her appeal to humanity was able to convert the votes of some of these Republicans who are less motivated by bigotry, but there are still a lot of Republicans in the room who are motivated by bigotry and didn't change their vote, and who do not see the humanity of Zoe Zephyr or people who participate in drag shows or anything of that nature. And so, you know, it was brave of her to do this. It was vulnerable. She may not have thought she would be able to persuade people in the way she did. She must have thought there was some chance. But, you know, with the way politics are in America right now, it seems just as unlikely as anything could be politically. And like I was saying, on the national level, I don't think we are going to see the same types of appeals to humanity working. Maybe a little bit on the margins, but to the extent where 12 votes are flipped, you know, we just should not get our hopes up about that when it comes to the national House or Senate, because you know, these people, the interests that back them up, and the amount of both corporate funded and unfortunately grassroots funded or grassroots supported backing that Republicans have on the national level is not going to allow them to budge on some of these issues. In some cases they will, and the pressure that's being put on them when it comes to economic issues and like Doge and Elon Musk by people like Bernie Sanders is definitely going to cause some of them to waver, and in some cases might even cause some of them to break from Trump. But when it comes to just like the pure humanity of the situation, I don't think that is the way to get Republicans to agree to protect trans lives and trans rights. They've made it pretty clear that they don't care about that. And so on the national level, I don't think appeals to humanity are necessarily the strategy. However, they can never stop. I mean, we always have to humanize trans people, put real stories of human beings that are transgender or something associated with that in front of people so that people can understand what it really is, and not this cartoonish, fetishized, demonized version that people are fed by Republican propaganda. And there are still openings where we can introduce people to real information about what it means to be trans or any kind of minority in a way that actually changes minds. But I think in general, we have to have a much more aggressive strategy than that to protect trans people and other minorities, because appeals to humanity have not worked so far, and I don't see a major trend similar to what happened with Zoe Zephyr here happening on a national level. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I would love to be wrong, but I doubt it.
Wow.
Good for her. I'm not familiar with Zephyr. I'm gonna have to keep an eye on her. That was awesome. You're absolutely right. That was a beautiful speech. And the fact that she was able to sway it, that's heartening. It's great to see. Like you said, I don't think it'll work on a national stage. I think we're going to have to be a little more aggressive to protect trans people and their rights just as human beings, unfortunately. I agree with you on that. But it's so nice to see and see so eloquently put like that, and just a basic appeal to human decency. It's not something you see very often, and it doesn't work very often, unfortunately. That's probably why you don't see it so much, but it's really great. I love seeing that happen, and it's crazy that it doesn't, right? The right is supposed to be the party of free speech and freedom of expression and freedom of this and freedom of that, right? They're the freedom party, the less government interfering in our lives party. Yet over and over again, they want to control how we do things, who can see what, who can do this, who's allowed to do that, who has these rights, who has those rights. And it's just so clearly hypocritical. It reminds me of actually when you and I worked in a pizza shop many years ago during the heyday of the pandemic. And we required anyone who came into the shop to order, they had to wear a mask. It was, a statewide mask mandate, and our company upheld that policy, and people had to wear masks. And people would come in without masks, so upset about that and screaming about their civil liberties and their freedoms and how we're taking their freedom away by requiring them to wear a mask. Just seemingly completely oblivious to the fact that in a free society, we also have the right to say we only want to serve people in masks, that freedom is a two-way street. And they can never seem to wrap their minds around that for whatever reason. I think it's just blatantly telling on themselves, where they don't really want freedom or this or that. They want things to be their way, and they want to call it freedom. I'm so glad she was able to stand up for herself like that and have a win. Hopefully we can see more stuff like that work on a bigger scale on a national level. I would love to see that. And the more people like Zephyr that stand up for her beliefs and actually have wins, the closer we can get to a society where those kind of appeals to humanity work, hopefully. Her actually succeeding in that doesn't feel like something you would see in real life, does it? It feels like the end of a movie about a transgender person, right? It feels like something you'd see in a movie. But speaking of something you would see in a movie, Bernie came out swinging at this rally in Kenosha. Have you seen this?
Say this. At this particular moment in history, despair is not an option. Giving up is not acceptable. None of us have the privilege of hiding under the covers as much as we might want to do that. The stakes for us, for our kids, for future generations, and for the planet is just too high.
Yeah, Bernie is drawing these huge crowds. He's going around, he's doing the same thing that he did whenever he ran, which was to have an extremely disciplined message and just be really effective at delivering a message that gets people electrified. And it kind of only gets more and more surprising over time, because he's like this old doddering man at this point. It wasn't like that when he first ran. He was still old, but he had a lot of life behind him. And nowadays he's slowed down a lot, but he's still delivering, and he's still showing that he has the ability to draw a crowd in a way that not a lot of people do. And he's got like some pretty some pretty intense bands playing music for him and stuff, and there's a clip of him backstage telling them to, like, we got to use music to unite people and fight for the working class, which I totally fucking agree with. I'm all about that. And it's just crazy. It's crazy that this, like, whatever 70-something-year-old man, politician is saying that. And Bernie's not perfect, but he has a way of, I guess, like we were saying before, appealing to humanity that just has an undeniable effect. And so he's drawing these large crowds, all this excitement. And, I said this before, I wonder what the end game is here. I really like the fact that he's doing this in an off season, like not aimed at any election or anything, because that's really atypical for any politician to do. And it shows that he has some kind of political strategy in mind here that he's trying to build towards. And the more people show up, and he has these huge overflow crowds, so he's doing 2-3 speeches that were supposed to be one. And it just seems like the more excitement that builds around that, more excitement than they were expecting to have, the more, actual swings they can take politically. And Bernie is the one to do it, because he's the one that understands how to put pressure on the system. And instead of doing, as he himself calls it, the backslapping, right? The backroom politics, backslapping. He tried that during the Biden era, and that's even what he said. He said that's what he was doing that whole time. And I guess it worked in terms of having a decent relationship with Biden, which led to some, meager process in the course of the Biden administration. Also a horrendous genocide and many other concessions that never should have happened. But, Bernie, I guess during that era, was able to maneuver somewhat successfully, maybe not that effectively, but now all of that has been wiped away. And so he recognizes once again that the best thing to do is to unite people against the system. And that's what he didn't feel as comfortable doing with Biden as president, because Biden was his friend. And that's probably why we haven't seen Bernie doing this pretty much this entire time. But we didn't see it during the first Trump term either. So for some reason, Bernie feels like now is the moment to hold these rallies. I've said it before. This is what Bernie always said he was going to do, is go around, hold events, bring major crowds out and get people excited in a way that puts pressure on the system. Even as president, that's what he said he would do, which would be amazing. That would be an amazing thing to have a president doing. The closest thing we have to that is Trump, which is horrendous. So I want to see where this strategy is going. I want to see Bernie pace himself, because he is definitely fragile. And, I think that he can take this incredibly far, and he should not stop. And even if whatever his short-term goals to, get people to put pressure on representatives, I believe what he's doing is he's going to places where Republicans won by thin margins. And so he's getting the electorate activated in these contentious districts, so that somebody better than their Republican representative can win the next time around, or so that some real populist pressure can be put on these Republican representatives, which in these shaky districts could work. If Republicans were in a safe district, feeling pressure from the left, even the left of their own party, left wing of their own party, is not going to affect them much because they're safe. But if they are facing contention from Democratic and more populist candidates and people like Bernie Sanders whipping people up against them, that's going to cause them to behave different politically. So that's the kind of pressure that we're going to see being effective on the national stage. And on the local stage, it's possible that there's more room for appeals to humanity, getting to know the people of your community that you agree or disagree with, and being able to appeal to them on that basis. That appeared to be what Zoe Zephyr did in that earlier clip, and it worked. But then on the national level, those types of appeals to humanity are not going to work as well as busting people's door down and telling them what the fuck is going to happen. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support the channel, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm going to be posting all kinds of exclusive content there, like book reviews, movie reviews, songs, beats, if you like the beats that play in the back of these podcasts. and more. If there's ideas that you have for exclusive content that you'd like to see, let me know and we'll figure some things out.